This is the non-fiction narrative of that story, a journey from the mud-sealed shacks of Nieuw Amsterdam to the razor-thin, mile-high visions of today. This is the history etched not in books, but in brick and glass. They say the soul of a city resides in its people, its streets, its rhythm. But what if the deepest truths of America's greatest metropolis, the ambition, the tragedy, the sheer audacious gamble, were actually held captive in its stone, its steel, and its silent, towering glass? Before starting the video, I have a small request for all of you. If you are new to my channel, please subscribe and stay with me to watch more videos like this. And if you're watching from Facebook, make sure to follow my Facebook page. If you enjoy the video, don't forget to like, comment to share your thoughts, and share it with your friends. The Vertical Fever, 1890 to 1931. Chapter 1, The Race to the Sun. The year 1890 was not merely the turn of a decade, it was the hinge upon which New York and the American century swung. The city was a volcanic forge, fueled by the staggering wealth of the Gilded Age, the relentless flow of immigration, and a new, almost mythical material, steel. Prior to this, construction was limited by the bearing wall. The higher you went, the thicker the walls had to be, making a structure's base impossibly massive. But steel, light, strong, and flexible, liberated the architect, transforming building from a grounded craft into a vertiginous art. A new, terrifying, exhilarating idea took hold: the skyscraper. The first shot in the race to the sun was not fired by a financier, but a newspaper baron, Joseph Pulitzer. His New York World Building, 1890, on Park Row, an ornate copper-domed giant, was the first structure in New York to surpass the 284-foot spire of Trinity Church. This was more than just a new building. It was an act of architectural sacrilege, a declaration that God's authority over the city's vertical dimension had been usurped by man's. Pulitzer, a fierce rival of William Randolph Hearst, understood that his paper's ambition had to be physically manifest. The tallest building was not just an office, it was a masthead. This initial burst of verticality was quickly followed by titans of commerce, each seeking to baptize their business in the celestial fire of the skyline. The Park Row Building, 1899, took the title, a 391-foot behemoth designed by R.H. Robertson, a man who, in his quiet determination, embodied the new Gilded Age mogul. But the real architectural shockwave came a few years later with a building that looked less like a column and more like a ship's prow, the Flatiron Building, 1902. Chapter 2, The Wedge and the Whimsy. The Flatiron, or the Fuller Building as it was originally named, was a colossal joke to many. Standing at the intersection of Fifth Avenue and Broadway, where the city's angular grid met the diagonal line of the old post road, its triangular shape seemed an engineering impossibility. Skeptics, particularly older, more traditional architects, called it Burnham's Folly, after its audacious Chicago-based designer, Daniel Burnham. They predicted that the first stiff wind would topple the 285-foot steel skeleton structure, scattering its terracotta facade across Madison Square. They were wrong, of course. The Flatiron didn't just stand, it became a phenomenon. It was an accidental generator of culture. The peculiar aerodynamics of the slender wedge created powerful downdrafts that lifted women's long skirts, a sight that drew throngs of men, prompting the term 23 Skidoo, referencing the nearby 23rd Street and the police constantly ushering them away. The building, by its very shape, forced the city to look at itself and laugh, demonstrating that New York's architecture was no longer about solemnity. It was about spectacle, interaction, and the public gaze. It was the first skyscraper to truly achieve celebrity status. But its success was only a prelude. The city's core was now a battleground of ego, money, and structural daring. The stakes were about to rise, literally, with the Cathedral of Commerce. Chapter 3, The Cathedral of Commerce and the First Crash. Frank Woolworth, the five and dime king, wanted a headquarters that was both an advertisement for his empire and a Catholic cathedral to American consumerism. The result was the Woolworth Building, 1913, a neo-Gothic masterpiece by architect Cass Gilbert that soared to 792 feet, surpassing every previous record. For 17 years, it was the tallest building in the world. The stories embedded in the Woolworth Building are remarkable. Deep within its terracotta-clad skin and vaulted lobby, Gilbert placed satirical gargoyles, tiny, unseen portraits of himself and Woolworth, immortalizing them as contributors to the project. Woolworth is depicted counting coins. Gilbert is shown holding a miniature model of the skyscraper. It was a secret architectural wink to the public. Look closely, and you'll see the human hubris that built this colossal thing. But the pursuit of height was not without its human cost, a reality starkly illustrated during the construction of the Equitable Building, 1915. This building wasn't built to be the tallest, but its sheer bulk. It occupied an entire city block and rose 40 stories straight up with no setbacks, was a revolutionary and horrifying development. The Equitable cast a massive, permanent shadow over the streets and neighboring buildings, completely blocking out the sun. The public outcry was immediate, fierce, and transformative. The result was the seminal 1916 zoning resolution, the first citywide zoning code in the United States. This law mandated the iconic wedding cake setbacks, the terracing of a building as it rose, that would define the New York skyline for decades, ensuring light and air reached the streets below. The law, born from a single building shadow, would shape the city's aesthetics for the rest of the century.
Chapter 4. The Great Depression's Grand Design. The 1920s Zenith. The Roaring Twenties saw a decade-long frenzy of construction, all hurtling toward the inevitable final battle for supremacy, the race for the 100-story tower. Three titans, driven by a cocktail of boom-era optimism and pure ego, entered the fray. Walter Chrysler, John J. Raskob, General Motors, and the developers of the 40 Wall Street building. The 40 Wall Street, the Bank of Manhattan Trust building, designed by H. Craig Severance, was the first to announce the magical 840-foot height, a seemingly insurmountable goal. Walter Chrysler, however, was a master of competitive maneuvering in the automotive world, and he brought that same ruthless cunning to architecture. His architect, William Van Allen, worked in absolute secrecy. Chrysler's building plan included a spire, a glittering Art Deco marvel, but the exact height was hidden from rivals. As 40 Wall Street neared completion, Van Allen's workers began assembling a massive 125-foot stainless steel crown inside the structure's central core. In a single, unbelievable 90-minute operation, the crown was raised and bolted into place, pushing the Chrysler Building, 1930, to 1,046 feet, a decisive, stunning victory that was celebrated by a collective gasp across the city. The Art Deco spire, a testament to Van Allen's genius and Chrysler's nerve, was adorned with custom gargoyles that looked like radiator caps and replicas of the 1929 Chrysler hood ornament, solidifying the structure as the ultimate expression of the machine age. Chrysler had won the race. But the victory was fleeting. John J. Raskob of General Motors, reportedly irritated by Chrysler's secret win, simply told his architect, William Lamb, "I want the tallest building in the world, and I want it fast." The site was the former Waldorf Astoria Hotel on Fifth Avenue. The building was the Empire State Building, 1931. Chapter 5. The Speed of the Spire. The story of the Empire State Building is not a tale of architectural grace, but of sheer, unholy efficiency. It was a construction marvel that should have taken years, but took only 410 days. A monument built in the jaws of the Great Depression, a time when most other construction projects had seized up and died. The men who built it, the Sky Boys, mostly Mohawk ironworkers, worked with a speed and fearlessness that is unimaginable today, earning between $5 and $15 a day, a fortune for the time. The incredible pace was achieved through relentless precision and logistics. A narrow-gauge railway system was built within the building's footprint, transporting materials directly to the base of the construction hoists. Every delivery, from the 10 million bricks to the 200,000 cubic feet of stone, was scheduled to the minute, creating a supply chain that was more akin to a military operation than a building project. A record-breaking 4.5 stories were completed in a single week. At 1,250 feet, it was an undeniable, permanent champion for 40 years. But its greatest untold secret was not its speed, but its bizarre original purpose for its crowning glory, the dirigible mooring mast. Raskob envisioned the building as a skyscraper and a transatlantic terminal, where airships or blimps would tether directly to the top, and passengers would disembark onto the 102nd floor, clear customs, and take an elevator to the street. The vision was pure science fiction. In reality, the 100-mile-per-hour winds at that height made docking a death-defying, ludicrous impossibility. Only one dirigible ever attempted it, a small private blimp, and the idea was quietly abandoned. The world's tallest structure was a ghost terminal, almost from the day it opened, forever crowned with a spire designed for a technology that failed to materialize. The Empire State Building, dubbed the Empty State Building during the Depression because so few tenants could afford space, stood as a breathtaking, slightly absurd monument to American grit and a vertical ambition that could outpace even a national economic collapse.
The Unseen City, 1932 to 1978. Chapter 6. The City Beneath the City. As the race to the absolute top paused for a time, New York's architectural focus shifted, often in secret, to what was happening beneath the sidewalks and behind the scenes of its most famous landmarks. The Grand Central Terminal, 1913, a majestic Beaux Arts gateway, is a classic example. Millions rush through it daily, but few know its most enduring and peculiar secret, Track 61. This hidden, dead-end platform, sealed off and largely forgotten, was originally built for the convenience of wealthy executives living in the suburbs. Its enduring legend, however, is linked to President Franklin D. Roosevelt. The platform was later modified with a special, oversized elevator that could lift an armored limousine directly to the street level, allowing the president, who sought to conceal his struggle with polio, to arrive and depart New York City in complete privacy, without ever being seen by the public or the press. This secret entryway, maintained to this day, is a hidden relic of a different era of presidential image management, a subterranean corridor of power beneath the city's most visible transit hub. Also in the 1930s, the construction of Rockefeller Center was a study in controlled corporate power. It was an inland court of international business, a city within a city, built atop a former tenement neighborhood. The construction, guided by the immense wealth of the Rockefeller family, involved a deliberate, almost military-style application of integrated art and commerce. The center's Art Deco design, its placement of public art like the famous statue of Prometheus, and its careful integration of office space, retail, and public plazas was an early blueprint for the modern corporate campus, a stark, organized contrast to the frantic individualist chaos of the earlier skyscraper boom. Chapter 7. The Unsinkable Concrete Island. Following World War II, the rise of international-style architecture, defined by minimalist steel and glass boxes, swept the world, and New York was its global laboratory.
The United Nations headquarters, 1952, designed by an international team including Le Corbusier and Oscar Niemeyer, represented a diplomatic ambition in architectural form. Its soaring, glass-walled Secretariat building contrasted sharply with the older masonry buildings and instantly redefined the city's relationship with the East River. This new, cold, clean aesthetic was perfected by the Seagram Building on Park Avenue, 1958. Designed by Mies van der Rohe, it was a dark bronze and glass monument to perfection. Its most radical feature was not its height, but its setback. Mies pushed the tower back from Park Avenue, creating an open granite plaza that sacrificed valuable rentable space for the sake of public beauty and architectural drama. It was a conscious rejection of the older, built-to-the-lot line New York, a gift to the city that was simultaneously a calculated act of corporate branding. But for every pristine glass tower, there was a tragedy unfolding in the city's housing projects. The mid-century was dominated by the titanic, controversial figure of Robert Moses, the master builder, who, without ever holding elected office, reshaped the physical fabric of New York more than any other person. His relentless pursuit of expressways, bridges, and high-rise housing projects, like the massive Stuyvesant Town Peter Cooper Village complex, meant the demolition of old neighborhoods and the forceful relocation of tens of thousands of residents. Moses's belief that cars and clearance were the cure for urban decay was challenged most famously by urban activist Jane Jacobs, whose book, The Death and Life of Great American Cities, became the Bible of the urbanist movement. The architectural and political battles of this era were not about height, they were about scale and community. The fight between the monolithic structures of government and the intimate, human-scale streets of neighborhoods.
Chapter 8. The Dangerous Calculation. The early 1970s brought another, more modern race to the top. The battle between New York and Chicago for the title of the world's tallest. In New York, the victor was the World Trade Center, 1973, the Twin Towers, whose 1,368-foot height dwarfed everything before them. Designed by Minoru Yamasaki, they were a stark, aluminum-clad vision of a new globalized economy, symbols of New York's power to connect the world. But in 1978, a separate, equally colossal skyscraper in Midtown nearly became the city's most unimaginable disaster. The Citicorp Center, now Citigroup Center, completed in 1977, was an architectural curiosity. A huge 915-foot tower raised on four massive 114-foot stilts, allowing a church to remain on the corner of the block beneath it. A compromise reached between the developer and St. Peter's Lutheran Church. The tower's architect, Hugh Stubbins, and its structural engineer, William Lemasurier, had designed the tower to withstand perpendicular, straight-on winds. But an engineering student named Diane Hartley at Princeton University, conducting a theoretical analysis, discovered a terrifying flaw. The building's innovative diagonal bracing system was dangerously weak when subjected to quartering winds hitting at a 45-degree angle. Lemasurier, the man who had staked his considerable reputation on the design, reviewed the calculations. They were correct. The building, in a fierce once-in-16-years hurricane, would buckle and collapse, likely killing thousands. Lemasurier faced the ultimate moral and professional dilemma. He could bury the mistake, or he could alert the city and risk his entire career, a massive public panic, and untold financial fallout. He chose the latter. The subsequent top-secret operation, unfolding during the height of a New York newspaper strike, which ironically helped keep the secret, involved welding massive steel plates over every critical structural joint. The repair was carried out at night under the guise of an architectural refit.
When a Category 3 hurricane, Hurricane Ella, barreled up the East Coast during the repairs, the crisis reached a terrifying peak. New York was placed on high alert for a structural collapse it didn't know it was facing. The incredible, heroic story of the Citicorp Tower's near miss remains one of the greatest and most successful engineering cover-ups in American history. It is a story of personal integrity, literally holding up a city's skyline.
The Modern Pantheon and the New Resilience, 1979, present. Chapter 9, The Postmodern Return. The 1980s saw a reaction against the called international style. Architects, tired of the glass box, began to inject whimsy, color, and historical reference back into the skyline. The birth of postmodernism. The most prominent example was the AT&T Building, now 550 Madison Avenue, 1984, designed by Philip Johnson. Its famous broken pediment Chippendale top was a playful, controversial slap in the face to the seriousness of its predecessors. It declared that corporate power could be fun, or at least ironic. Johnson, the ultimate architectural provocateur, was giving the city a monumental piece of furniture, a clear signal that the vertical fever was back, this time with a sense of humor. This era also saw the transformation of the city's industrial past into its creative future. The Soho district, once a forgotten manufacturing hub, became a global showcase for cast iron architecture. The ornate, prefabricated facades, originally built to mimic more expensive stone, became highly sought after, transforming the neighborhood from an industrial zone into a vibrant, high-end artists and retail district, a testament to the city's ability to recycle and reimagine its own history. Chapter 10, The Ground Zero of the World. The architectural story of New York City hinges on two dates: 1890, when the vertical race began, and September 11, 2001, when that race ended in fire and dust. The collapse of the Twin Towers was not just a human tragedy, it was an architectural trauma that left a physical and psychological void in the heart of the city's identity. The rebuilding of the World Trade Center site became a national, political, and emotional crucible. The design of One World Trade Center, completed 2014, was fraught with controversy, competing visions, and security demands. The final design by David Childs was a sleek, angular monolith. Its symbolic height, 1,776 feet, referring to the year of the Declaration of Independence, was an intentional act of patriotic defiance. However, the deepest architectural message of the site resides not in the tower's height, but in the National September 11th Memorial and Museum. The Reflecting Absence Memorial, where the exact footprints of the two original towers are marked by deep, cascading waterfalls, creates a powerful, silent counter-monument. It is a space defined by what is missing, a profound recognition that the greatest architectural statement a city can make is not about rising up, but about remembering what was lost. The architecture here is one of grief, resilience, and unyielding memory. Chapter 11, High Lines and Humble Bricks. As the 20th century progressed, New York's architectural evolution moved away from absolute height and toward adaptive reuse and human-scale urbanism. The creation of the High Line, opened in phases starting in 2009, is one of the most successful urban interventions in American history. A dilapidated, abandoned, elevated freight rail line, once slated for demolition, was transformed into an extraordinary linear park. The High Line is a brilliant piece of architectural preservation, treating the former industrial structure as an archaeological ruin and letting the wild, reseeded landscape grow through it. It fundamentally altered the value and use of the adjacent meatpacking district and Chelsea, triggering a massive boom in real estate and a new type of architecture that incorporated and celebrated the city's industrial past. This new focus on livability and community continued to evolve. Buildings were no longer just trophies. They were designed to be porous, to interact with the street.
the quiet, consistent preservation efforts across the boroughs, the landmarking of districts like Greenwich Village and Brooklyn Heights ensured that the city's original whispers of brick, the brownstones, the cast iron storefronts, the humble but enduring tenements were not entirely lost to the shout of glass. Today, as the city reaches for new vertical extremes, with super talls like the residential Billionaires Row towers, which are often criticized for their slender profiles and exclusive nature, the architectural story of New York City is as complex and contradictory as ever. It is a city that builds monuments to wealth that often stand empty, while simultaneously fighting to preserve the very soul of its walkable historical streets. The skyline remains a testament to unstoppable American ambition, a place where fortunes and egos rise and fall in the blink of an eye. The whispers of the old brick and the shouts of the new glass continue their endless, fascinating dialogue, a conversation that is, and always will be, the true, untold story of New York City.